Greetings and salutations. It's Matt here, and I'd like to cordially welcome you to another stellar episode of New Game Plus, and quite possibly the last time within the confines of this TV screen that you'll see before you. To lay down the itinerary for the next 30 minutes, unfortunately, you're stuck with me. Though if you live and breathe video games, rest assured you're in the right place. This edition of New Game Plus is centered around looking back on the last 10 years of my time on screen, as well as gaming in general, and considering the show coexisted with 3 unique console generations, needless to say, I'm extremely excited to have you join me on this adventure of diverse reflection to bookend what has been one of the longest running game-themed shows on television. Without further ado, let's switch gears. You know, now that I think about it, it's pretty crazy once I stop, look back, and reflect on how long we've been on the air and all the games that I've had the pleasure of experiencing through that time. 10 whole years! That's effectively a lifetime by the game industry standards. I mean, by my excellent skills of deduction, I've been enough of a dinosaur to declare an entire decade of Game of the Year finalists, but I'm hoping that my takes had not been too bad throughout the last 10 years. Being completely honest, I hate the idea of having to give the prestigious title out to just one game when there are plenty of titles out there I'd love to talk up just as much and are just as deserving of that title. So with that, I'd like to look back on my previous Game of the Year choices, reflect on them, and maybe provide an alternate experience on par or even better than what my tastes were prepared for during each year. Welcome to Unsung Heroes, 10 years of underrated gems. Starting off with 2012, the year I joined New Game Plus as a cast member, my first Game of the Year went to Season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead. While I think my views on it have waned over time, especially the seasons that followed it, I'd like to direct attention over to the initial release of Capcom's Dragon's Dogma. It's a bit of a weird one to call underrated since an upgraded version of it subtitled Dark Arisen came out the following year, and when a PC port dropped in 2015, it eventually got the attention it so truly deserved. It's a great fantasy adventure that has a couple of weird quirks, but some incredible combat thanks to director Hideaki Itsuno, who you might know is from his work on Devil May Cry. Another interesting mechanic is its pawn system, which are AI-controlled party members who are created by yourself and other players online, which you can hire and give gifts to, creating this quasi-mercenary ecosystem to dabble in. I was admittedly disappointed at first with Dragon's Dogma's pawn system, and thinking that shoving in co-op multiplayer would have been a better solution, but I eventually warmed up to it as the game does a good job justifying its existence, both in a narrative and a mechanical sense. 2013 saw Naughty Dog's The Last of Us shuffle onto the last years of the PS3, but its cultural impact signified an impressive swan song for the console. I still hold the first game in the series as a high for the Sony-inclined developer, but if you're really looking for a double dose of nihilistic hellscape, I'd hardly recommend Shin Megami Tensei 4 for the 3DS. It didn't do too well over here in Australia due to a horrendously staggered release schedule and no physical copies to boot, but thankfully it's a brutal, thought-provoking RPG that's better than the sum of its parts. Now, I can't get into it too much because if I do, we'll be here all day. But if you have a 3DS and you're hungry for a great monster raiser, make sure you pick it up before the Nintendo eShop closes down. For 2014, my pick decided to buck the trend a little bit with Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. It was panned on release due to the skerrick of content included, but strangely enough, I found it a more focused and whole experience than the Phantom Pain was. I'm gonna add more fuel to this fire and advise to check out the equally controversial Drakengard 3. An action-adventure title developed by a few ex-Carvia staff after their dissolution, along with industry darling Yoko Taro. Drakengard 3 is a bit of a tough sell considering his team's recent output. It's a bit hard to imagine a time before Nier Automata had given Taro the critical reception he most certainly finally deserved, but if you're looking for an interesting time capsule experience, Drakengard 3 is going to either make it or break it for you. An excellent narrative, great character design, and audio as well is worth overlooking its quirks, but my favourite fact about the game is that Drakengard 3 doesn't really care if you like it or not, and it's really an attitude in game design and attitude that I'll begin to warm up to in the coming years. Now, 2015 had many treats in store, and while we were all enamoured by Toby Fox's Undertale, coincidentally my game of the year, there were a few other titles worthy of immersing yourself in. I'll just come out and say it right now, but Final Fantasy Type 0 HD It's definitely a better game the less you know about it going in, but let's just say that director Hajime Tabata, waxing lyrical on politics, ethics, and the military complex, provides one of the best sad boy and/or sad girl experiences of the 2010s. Chances are you can pick it up quite cheap since most people bought it for the bundled Final Fantasy XV demo, but honestly the ride is worth whatever the price you pay for admission. 2016 is once again such a solid year for me that I'll stick by my initial choice because it's just too damn good. None other than the French-developed Fury. A 1v1 melee bullet hell boss rush blast that breaks you and builds you back up to overcome its most brutal challenges. Everything from the art direction to the incredibly solid combat, and a soundtrack expertly crafted by esteemed artists like Danger, Waveshaper, and Carpenter Brute, Fury needs to be seen and played to be believed. 2017 brought us the resurging interest in Japanese games from the perspective of both critics and Western consumers. Among a list of strong contenders, I gave my vote to the localization of Yakuza 0, but I felt that Danganronpa V3, Killing Harmony, was a pick I'd also recommend after stewing over it for some time. This is one choice I'd have to get you to trust me on, as the closing hours of the game is mostly the reason why, and I'll be damned if I spoil it for you right now. Unless you want me to. It took me some time, but I eventually warmed to its message, and if you've yet to play it, there's a very good chance you'll feel the same way too. In time. 2018, I gave the well-earned title to Monster Hunter World. If I could retroactively switch, I'd swap it with the 25th Ward, the Silver Case. A follow-up to Grasshopper Manufacture's debut title, the 25th Ward conveys a chilling dystopia full of corrupt police, cults of personality, and the ever-increasing chasm of the class divide. Originally released as a Java-based mobile game well before smartphones hit the scene, it was eventually remade from the ground up, and honestly, to lose this game to an obsolete platform would have been a right shame. This remains one of Suda51's greatest directed pieces, and is the perfect case to present why game preservation is so important. 2019 was a year of many rehashed ideas, and the remake for Resident Evil 2 was hardest to top, with good reason. Funnily enough, Grasshopper Manufacture goes back to back with my retrospective switches with Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes. Aside from its surface level top-down cooperative action, it's a satisfying beat 'em up with a lot of thought and love put into its thematic and narrative elements. Looking deeper, it's a personal tale, where the game's events act as an analogue for director Suda51 and his entire time spent within the game industry. It simultaneously celebrates the joys of game development while warning of the dangers of insatiable creative pursuits, and quite honestly, there's nothing else like it on the market. Going a little bit different here, and I'm going to be sticking to my guns for my 2020 Game of the Year. Moon Remix RPG Adventure is a bit of a difficult one to articulate, not to mention the fact that it was originally a PS1 title finally localized an odd 15 years later, so it's a little bit cheating, a little bit not. Like Final Fantasy Type 0, the less you know about it before going in, the better. But let's just say that if you're an RPG buff, its humanist and good-natured messaging is something you'll get a right kick out of. And now we reach our final year, 2021. And I just realized that I've never formally announced it on New Game Plus, specifically my Game of the Year for 2021. Regardless, it was another year with decent contenders, but there was no game that spoke to me more than No More Heroes 3. Well, newcomers might be confused as to why that is. As someone who's seen Travis Touchdown grow from the callous moron to the introspective, responsible man, proving that even he is not safe from the dreaded clutches of character development. That said, No More Heroes 3 has a lot to say when reading between the lines, particularly about the pitfalls of how we constantly consume and demand content in the year 2021 and more, and becoming aware of this really amplifies the tragedy of Travis Touchdown as a character. For video games, it's as punk as it gets, and No More Heroes 3 is a shining diamond in the rough that was 2021, as long as you give it a chance. As much as I'd like to give 2022 a crack, we're only really a third in the year, so it's a little bit kind of unfair to do that, and I unfortunately won't be around long enough to declare one more Game of the Year, so I hope you really enjoyed this fun little introspective journey. So, can you get the editor to star wipe me out of here, because I really have nothing else to say. Welcome back as I join you in my latest stream setup, which I thought was appropriate given our next look into the history of New Game Plus. In tandem with our Australian TV production, we were early adopters of the live streaming format that began gaining immense popularity through the early 2010s all the way to the cultural behemoth that it is today. These streams were the textbook definition of variety, as our aim as New Game Plus was to provide an informative yet laid-back broadcast for viewers to tune into during their downtime, covering a wide range of games spanning multiple generations of consoles and genres. Throughout the decade-long tenure, I thought I'd look back on some of the greatest hits of our exploits on YouTube, Twitch, and if you're old enough to remember, Justin TV. Without further ado, let's get stuck into it. The fondest memories that first spring to mind begin with our own take on the Commonwealth Games running alongside the real-life sporting event back in 2014. We took liberties with events such as track and field, fencing, and volleyball, then replaced them with gaming equivalents such as QWOP, Mirror's Edge, Tekken Ball, and Bushido Blade.
This is my psych out.
The icing on the cake was our terrible representation of Jamie in a New Game Plus themed Royal Rumble event. His reaction, worth its weight in gold.
Jamie's on his
Looking back on it, we could have been a little bit nicer with our depiction of him, but to make up for it, we set his stats to the highest possible levels and he proceeded to wipe the floor with every other wrestler on the roster. So depending on your sense of humour, it kind of evens out. The next crowning achievement was our series of Holo Stream events around the course of Halloween and the Extra Life game days, where New Game Plus and our beloved viewers raised hundreds to thousands of dollars for children's hospitals around the globe. It was for a great cause, and it was an awesome reason to run 24 straight hours of our most cherished horror-themed games. I never passed up the chance to scare with Eternal Darkness either.
Yeah, head over to the bathroom as well. Yeah, the bath, examine.
You're such a You're a wow, okay.
Though I eventually got my comeuppance.
That was open previously. I don't really want to go back to fetus baby.
Oh God! The inclusion of stream regular Nas brought out the most primal of rage within me.
You're a dunce. You are
It's
a
the
dunce.
most offensive thing you've ever said to me.
You are a dunce.
But on the other side of the coin, blossomed into a blend of camaraderie and utter chaos.
Just do it. Just do it. Maybe if you... Whoa!
Contrary to my insular tendencies, I did have opportunities to leave the house and take my streaming exploits to new frontiers. The Nintendo Switch release in 2017 brought a whole new level of physicality to gaming that the original Wii release couldn't.
Let's see how you did.
And it allowed me opportunity to spread the good word about the one true game.
And how about you, good sir? What have you been playing?
Oh. I'd like to get you all guys to stop playing Persona and play Shin Megami Tensei. They are much better games than Persona.
As the avenue of COVID rocked the foundations of how we produced the show, we took to the stream waves with reckless abandon, even with its own set of unique challenges.
Put icons on your map and save them for later, but it's not really needed here because you can just because there are teleport points everywhere. A lot of points are highlighted on the map, and at the same time, well, you kind of know where the main points that you want to go at. So it's kind of really superficial in that regard.
I'm sorry, she's just
What is that man doing to that cat?
she's tangled into my microphone and I can't put her down.
Peter, please. Peter, please.
Okay, she's good, she's good.
So there you have it. You might have noticed that that list may have seemed extremely curated, and you'd be right, because it is. While the format of the show, as you know, it will be no more,
Our live stream broadcast will continue on for the foreseeable future. So to ensure you don't miss out on any of the action, make sure you're following our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/NewGamePlusTV, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NewGamePlusTV. As we head into the final commercial break, please ensure you stay tuned. Or if you're down with the content creator lingo, like, comment, and subscribe.
Now, as New Game Plus's regularly scheduled TV show reaches its closure, the door of opportunity swings wide open for me. For one, it leaves a lot more time for me to go play games I never got the chance to give any attention to, but to also go back and replay titles that I truly adore. Then it got me thinking pretty hard about silly vox pop questions like, what items would you take with you on a desert island? And considered if I applied that to video games, then it better be a desert peninsula, otherwise I'd be hard pressed to find an outlet to power my monitor and console. So instead, let's rephrase it to a handful of games I can and will play forever, appropriately titled The Killer 7. Kicking off the list, my number 7 game has to go to God Hand. Now, don't let any particular professional reviews dissuade you from the brilliance contained within the DVD that it shipped in. It's the last game developed by Clover Studio before most of their staff split into Tango Gameworks and Platinum Games. God Hand is a deceptively good swan song for the developer prior to their closure. While it's a game constructed from the same engine used in Resident Evil 4, it's reworked to play like one of the most solid beat-em-ups in existence. Think of something like Streets of Rage or Final Fight, but in an over-the-shoulder perspective. The main reason this takes a spot is that the progression and the mechanics help you make the game feel drastically different each time that you play it. Depending on how well you do, the game will get easier or harder dynamically, tracking your abilities and providing you a challenge based on how well you're understanding the game at the time. Another reason is that the game will give you the keys to the castle almost immediately, learning new abilities and being able to tweak combo paths and moves to what works best for you. Its dynamic nature makes it a game suited well for replayability. Number 6 adds F-Zero GX to my list. Yeah, note that, $39.94. Yeah, remember a time when used games were a bit more reasonable in terms of price? Yeah, I sure did. Released during a time where Nintendo kept themselves pretty insular in terms of third-party collaboration, Sega's very own Amusement Vision studio, who you may know from Sega AM4 and Ryuga Kotoka Studio, were commissioned to build the game from the ground up. A blisteringly fast futuristic racer with a cosmic skill ceiling, F-Zero GX is the one racer I fire up from time to time, and it never fails to evoke emotions of frustration, anger, and eventually complete joy once I complete the game's notoriously difficult story mode. Now, number 5 belongs to Bloodborne, which I'm certain needs no introduction. Despite its strange performance quirks and difficulty spikes, I'm smitten with its pace, environmental and boss design to even care. While I'm still savouring Elden Ring like an A1 steak, I'll probably end up finding myself in Yharnam once more after its completion. Its diverse build and stat manipulation, as well as the game's tendency to encourage aggressive play, will ensure I'm continually seduced by its eldritch stylings for many years to come. Reaching number 4, the hook of this game is the inverse of the previous and shares the same name of this segment, none other than Killer 7. While the previous game entices me through its mechanics, Killer 7 is a game that draws you in through your ability to read between the lines in its political subtext, discovering lore and cues you might have missed the last time you immersed yourself in it. It's dense in characterization, completely oozing with style, and it's a frightening yet intoxicating experience the more times you play it. Number 3 appeals to my most primal of desires, and that is score attacking and speedrunning. Games like Ikaruga are what might first come to mind when you think of developer treasure, but to me, it's always Gunstar Heroes. While not overly complex, the ebb and flow of side-scrolling movement, physics, and boss design went on to inspire some of the biggest shmups on the market, like Cuphead, for instance. The biggest draw for me is its weapon mechanics, where picking up specific elements will change the way that your weapon works, all the way down to its fire rate, its trajectory, or even its power. It helps make each run feel unique and encourages experimentation on the fly when higher difficulties demand it. The second ranked game on my list is one that I've held close to my heart for many, many years, and while its predecessors hold their own, Mother 3 is undoubtedly a title I regularly want to experience time and time again. I'll be here all night if I don't constrain myself on the matter, but its overall design, plot progression, and themes emerge to manifest into one of the greatest tragedies to grace the gaming industry, as well as any storytelling medium in general. Its universe, characters, and unparalleled charm is difficult to overstate because it's just that good. Experience it at least once in your life, or I'll happily do it for you. Now, number 1 is a pretty prestigious position for games that I'd have no qualms with playing over and over until the disc runs out, but funnily enough, this is the only game on the list that only saw a digital release over here in Australia, so just imagine it in my hand as I reveal that it is none other than Tokyo Jungle. My god, the fact that this game is only playable on a PS3 and never got ported onto easily accessible platforms should be deemed a crime in several states. Part survival game and roguelike, Tokyo Jungle concerns playing as a variety of different carnivorous and herbivorous species striving to survive for as long as they can in a nature-reclaimed Japan. Rich in mechanics, despite its simple premise, you can play it the way you want to as well as play cooperatively with a person on the same couch as you, and is an experience that has no equal, even to the point where it has no port. I mean, all I'm trying to say is that I'm not salty, but Sony or some other thrifty niche publisher should definitely look to preserve this masterpiece of a game. And there you have it, the Killer 7. 7 games I'd take with me and play until the end of time. Did you happen to have similar choices? If so, give yourself a pat on the back. If not, well, that's okay, I still love you. Well, that just about wraps it up on my end. It's been a wicked ride, covering video games from the PS3 all the way to the PS5, and it's almost surreal knowing how far the medium has both progressed and regressed in various aspects of its existence. You may have noticed that a few visual elements of this episode pay respect to one of my favourite game directors and studios of all time, both Suda51 and Grasshopper Manufacture respectively. This was carefully considered, as one of Suda51's major themes in the games he develops is known as Kill the Past. While this motif takes on a few forms depending on the context, I've applied it here as a means to comfortably finish my involvement with the show's current form in order to move on to bigger and better things. Some of this manifests in allowing more time for my current hobbies, and even engaging with games in ways that aren't particularly journalistic in nature. Ergo, to develop further, I must first kill that past. Being able to meet some of the heaviest hitters in the industry, travel overseas as a reporter for games, the unbridled joy in meeting fans at conventions, and lamenting over the fact that there'll never be a game as good as Tokyo Jungle ever again, I'm eternally grateful for the many opportunities that New Game Plus provided, and there was quite honestly nothing like what I experienced during my tenure. And while we say see ya for a bit, it's most certainly not goodbye. Keep an eye and an ear out as I'll be pursuing more avenues in the industry, and as usual, don't forget to subscribe to all of our social media channels as we work hard towards our passion projects, these of which will no doubt be documented at our website, newgameplus.tv. But before I go, I have one more favour to ask of you.